Thanks, Jeff. We've been doing a series called People of Destiny over the last few weeks. We've looked at various characters from the Bible, in particular characters of destiny. We've interspersed that with people's testimonies and people's stories, because we are actually, whether you like it or not, we are a people of destiny. And our stories kind of have got that destiny in them, I think. And today we're fortunate enough to have Charlie with us, who's been on a big jaunt in France. Welcome back. And Charlie's going to tell us his story this morning. So welcome, Charlie.
Thank you, Kevin. Yes, I'm still in the French mode, ladies and gentlemen, so forgive me if I'm a little bit slow. Try to keep it going as long as I can. So, good morning, everybody, and I'm feeling really fired up this morning, despite still being in France, if you like. It's just so lovely to be here again, to be playing to you and to be performing with these guys and gals. It's such a joy to be here. So thank you so much for the invitation and for the opportunity of talking to you today. I shared my story with you 4 years ago, and Kevin has asked if I would do so again. So apologies to those who are listening to this for the second time. I have made a few amendments and a couple of additions, which I hope you will find interesting. For some reason, I've never been too fond of the word testimony. So I'm going to use the words faith journey and hopefully tell a bit of a story for you. Important episodes in my life and their impact on my faith and my being. And I'm also going to be telling you a little of my musical journey, because for me the two of them are inextricably linked. So to help paint the picture, I was brought up into a loving family. I had one sister, I still have one sister who is 5 years older. We had Christian values. We went to church, but we were not regular worshippers, and God did not feature as part of our lives. I attended Sunday school at St. Peter's Titchur. I remember going to the little sweet shop that we had in the square afterwards and spending an amazing amount of time trying to choose 6 licorice or something. A few pence, I would imagine it was in those days. I went to school in Titchfield at West Hill Park. Was pretty hopeless at scripture, that's how we called it. And I didn't enjoy my lessons, but I do remember being incredibly struck by the passage that Jeff has just read to us so beautifully, where Samuel is lying down in the temple. And Samuel's lovely response, "Speak, Lord, your servant." He's literally, your servant is listening. I don't know why that struck me so much. This was the Bible that I had at the time. It's nicely used and well worn, isn't it? It was a present from my grandmother at Christmas 1966, so I was 9. And beautiful Bible. And this meant so much to me. And I don't know why that passage remains in my head, but even when I hear that passage today, it sends a little tingle down my spine. I was confirmed at the age of 14 in Portsmouth Cathedral. Was at Portsmouth Grammar School at the time. Not happy memories. I was bullied quite a bit at school. I played truant, I'm ashamed to say. I attended confirmation classes, but they didn't have any real meaning. But I do remember the moment the bishop laid his hands on my head, feeling this incredible and instant surge of power. And that's not something that anybody can ever take away from me. Fast forward a few years, I went off to study law in Bristol. A couple of friends encouraged me to join the Christian Union. I was a bit reluctant because I thought they were a bit odd. But very reluctantly, I did agree to go to an evening at a church in Bath. I wish I could remember the church because I would love to revisit it. I just remember it was a film about American teenagers coming to faith, and I remember feeling distinctly uneasy and wanting to get out of the church, wanting to leave halfway through the film. And to this day, I can't explain why. I don't know what was going on. But it wasn't long after that I took myself off to visit Durham Park. Some of you may know it. It's a lovely National Trust property to the north of Bath. And I know it sounds a bit daft, but after looking around the house, I remember very vividly walking in the park talking to myself. Well, anybody could talk to themselves, people think that. I know I am a bit bad. But I was then experiencing the sensation that I was actually talking to a higher being. And I believe that this was my first real encounter with God. And I just remember it feeling very natural. And I do remember an enormous sense of warmth and peace. As far as music is concerned, well, I've played the piano since, for as long as I can remember, since the age of 6 and possibly before that. My father was a very accomplished pianist, and the piano was central in the home. I had the gift of being able to play from ear, and only studied up to grade 4. I used to amuse my examiners because I would go into the examination room and kind of ignore the manuscript because I just learned everything off by heart. And at the age of 14, all I wanted to do was mess around, improvise, do things. I love the word do. Elton John was a big influence. I can remember sitting at the piano and pretending I was Elton John, playing his, with a preference for his quieter ballads. I was incredibly shy playing in front of anyone, and it wasn't until my mid-20s that I really first performed in public. I got a job teaching French at a wonderful school, Yardley Court in Tunbridge. It was supposed to be just for 2 terms to kind of fill in between my legal studies. But I was just so happy and just instantly settled into this amazing school and ended up staying for 11.5 years. And then very important years for me. I was writing carols in 1986 and 1988, written music for 2 adaptations of the children's stories. Some of you may know them, Goblin, The Witch's Hat, and Magician's Nephew. And they were fabulous shows. Such happy times. And very meaningful too. And it was as a result of these that people started saying how much they loved the music and was I going to do anything further. And so I decided to put together some compositions, and in 1991, so yeah, a few years on, formed a company to release my first CD entitled Between the Worlds. So yes, my life at Yardley was not only blissfully happy, we were always laughing, playing practical jokes on each other amongst the staff and amongst the boys. But it was also a great turning point for me spiritually. I learned much from listening to colleagues giving morning assemblies, particularly if it involved a story. We had some really great storytellers on the staff. But it was also the funeral I attended of the sister of one of the boys that had a huge impact. Sarah Epsley was 12 and had suffered from leukemia. During the service, the vicar recounted her faith and how she knew where she was going. And on being questioned about this, Sarah had replied, because Jesus has been to see me. He came and sat on my bed. And when I heard those words, they just seemed to be so real. I just knew that a 12-year-old girl was not making this up, but it really happened. I lived in the school, and in the summer of 1985, I thought it was time I bought a little house, and I put the bike in the car and set off for Suffolk, where property was cheap at the time. I fell in love with Suffolk, a delightful county. Bought a little 2 up, 2 down for £17,000. Spent every half term and holiday up there. And in between gardening and painting and decorating, I would be out on the bike, exploring, cycling for miles and seeing nothing but farms and churches. And it was in the church in the village of Huntingfield, it wasn't far from where I was living, that I picked up a leaflet one afternoon. Took it home, read it, reread it, pondered over it, and that evening prayed the prayer asking Jesus into my life. What can I say? It was an incredibly real and instant feeling of power surging through, not unlike the moment when the bishop laid his hands on my head. It's very hard to describe, isn't it? But it was this enormous feeling of inner peace. And I can remember the following day just feeling so different. I found I had a changed attitude towards people. I had a greater warmth, I suppose, towards people. I can remember returning to school for the start of the new term and having a whole different outlook towards my colleagues on the staff and towards the boys. And a deeper level of compassion, I think is how I describe it as well. A few more years passed. I left Yardley in the summer of 1993. It was time to move on. I returned home to Titchfield. Titchfield was home, where Suffolk had been a holiday home, if you like, and became involved in my village church, St. Peter's. James Mitchell Innes was our vicar at the time, and James encouraged me to attend an Alpha course. It was the first that St. Peter's had held, and the Alpha course was in its infancy then. And I felt that God was calling me to use my gift and minister through my music in some way, but didn't know what. So it was a time of great exploration. I was doing some restaurant playing at the time, and I worked as a weekend assistant for a firm of estate agents for my sins. I enrolled on a counselling foundation course at Fareham College, where I began, perhaps for the first time, to explore and learn a lot about myself, as well as other people. One of the ladies on the course was working with the homeless. I began volunteering initially with Fareham Friends of the Homeless, helping to provide lunch at the drop-in in West Street in Fareham. I can remember the winter and serving lunch and chatting to men and women who were sleeping out in the open, and totally aghast at how they were able to live in these conditions. I remember opening the door at lunchtime to one gentleman. His face, it was a freezing morning, and his face, his moustache and beard were completely covered with ice. And then I went on following that to work full-time with homeless young people in Gosport. And it was quite funny, as for a time, I had two hats on. At weekends, I was trying to sell, in those days, £250,000 houses, they'd probably be £1 million houses now. And during the week, trying to help a homeless youngster find and keep accommodation. So in a sense, dealing with the same commodity, namely housing, but in two totally different ways. And they were challenging times, and my faith was very important, not only from a compassion point of view, but also for empowerment. I remember one afternoon while feeling exasperated over a particular client, one of my colleagues offering some words of comfort. He just turned to me and he said, "Charlie, you're doing God's work." There were also times when I would go home with a particular client in mind, feeling that I had done all that I could. And then everything goes through your mind, doesn't it? You think, could I have done something different? Could I have done something more for them? And to be able to offer them to God in prayer, so a real sense of offloading and giving to God. And all through this time, I was feeling called to play my music to the man in the street. It was a legal expression that I'd come across during the course of my studies. I began to do some parish visiting and leading some services. James started the idea of an informal service once a month, and I led several of these. They were wonderful evenings, with people sitting with lovely grand pianos and people sitting around the piano with candles, etc. I remember them as being very atmospheric evenings. And then Thomas Hamilton went on the rampage with his gun in Dun Lane. It was March 1996, and it's hard to believe that it was 25 years ago this last March. And like most of you here, I can remember just being glued to the television and finding it really hard to accept what was unfolding. But feeling a very deep sense of wanting to be there and thinking, don't die here, that's just ridiculous. And then they showed some interior shots of the cathedral. I remember seeing the piano. And again, there was this, wow, I'd love to play this piano. And it was Holyrood. It happened in Holyrood. I forget the lady's name. She was the wife of the curate. And I think we met up for a jam session one morning, afternoon in Holyrood. And I was recounting this to this girl, and she came back with, "Why don't you go, Charles?" That was the spark. That was the spark I needed. I can remember feeling really energized, whizzing home and thinking, what do I do? So I picked up the phone, managed to get to one with the maps, spoke with the minister, and said, look, I'm living on the south coast, I'd like to be with you, can I come and play? Please come, he said. So there we are. So we decided that it would be 2 weeks after the shootings. That was when the world's media had left, and the community was left to believe in peace. And I caught the little train up to Glasgow, spent the night in Glasgow, caught the interconnection train on Sunday. I remember getting off the train, and there was this incredible silence. Everyone was so quiet. Anyway, I played over the course of 3 days on and off during the cathedral. One of the most wonderful things in my life to have done, just to have ministered to this huge number of visitors. We had a huge number of visitors. They came from all over the world. 2 years passed, and I felt the time was right to purchase an electronic piano that I could easily transport around to know what I was going to do with it. I just thought it was the time to buy it. So I did a lot of research, took a lot of advice, and finally settled on the best piece of equipment I could afford. And it's still going strong after 19 years. And I used it for the first time at an Alpha Course day out. Some of you may know it. It's Green Pastures in Hamburg. And I can remember our vicar, James's wife Carol, that evening, when I played for the very first time. She said, Charles, I believe God is wanting to use you in a very special, particular way. And it was in 1999 that I spotted an advert for a weekend craft show at Fort Fabric, one of those old forts up on the top of the hill. I approached the organisers, who were only too delighted for me to set up my gear and have a stall selling at the time just that one CD between the words. They were also happy to pay me on the basis that it was part entertainment. And so I began my ministry to the man in the street. That was my goal. Entertaining, yes. Meeting customers, yes. Having a laugh, being a bit silly, playing Christmas songs at Easter, all that type of stuff, and playing requests, but also ministry. And I became a regular there at their Christmas and Easter shows, and they also ran shows too, lovely shows, spring and autumn at nights in college, and all wonderful occasions. One visitor to the show at Fort Fabric the following year was John Daniels. He came over and introduced himself, and I'll just tell you a little bit more about John in a moment. So my first concert booking, which came about through a lady at Fort Fabric, who I met, was on the 13th of May 2000 at Littlehampton Baptist Church. It was an afternoon invitation by the local torch group for the blind and visually impaired. And I would not be telling you the truth if I said I wasn't a little bit nervous, but also felt very empowered. I can remember feeling very empowered. My full-time work with the homeless came to an end on account of various issues with the running of the organisation. I was thinking about adding to my counselling skills, and in September 2000 was fortunate enough to be accepted on the diploma in counselling course at University of East Anglia in Norwich. This was a very important time in my life for me. Not only did I love living in Norwich, wonderful city with a real heart, but I also learned a huge amount about myself. One of the principles of counselling training is dealing with your own issues to help empower you to be in a position to understand others. So it was very much a sharing of your inner self, and for the first time in my life I bared all to my colleagues and tutors on the course. It was incredibly liberating and empowering. And after the first 6 months of training, we began our one-to-one sessions with the students. And I also had a weekly placement at Norwich Prison for about 4 months, so I would see a whole variety of prisoners. And I can remember one, what a privilege it was just to be in a room with them telling you all kinds of things. And I can remember one started crying. And, it was this big macho, and I thought, if he's going to blame me, don't cry. And I thought, well, the red button is just down there under my table. But, there was not There was just no sense of ever wanting to press that button. We just had this there was just this amazing sense of togetherness and warmth and peace. Amazing. And what a privilege it was to be on the receiving end of their hurts and pains. The course also had a deep spiritual element. I was fortunate enough to be taught by Professor Brian Ford, who was this country's still alive, but he's retired, but he was this country's leading academic in the field of person-centered counselling, and what an amazing man, what an inspirational man. And once a week we used to meet at the Julian Centre in Norwich. Some of you may know it's the site of the shrine of Julian of Norwich. Mother Julian of Norwich, I should say. And it was an amazing experience to meet in this holy place. During that year away, I continued to attend craft shows during the holidays when I would come in to Titchfield. And at the end of the course, I got in touch with other craft show organisers, and for the next 12 years, travelled all over the country, a little bit about in the same way as Kevin was saying he used to tour over the country. I don't think I ever did 40 gigs in a week, but so performing at weekend shows, many in marquees where I would set up my equipment, including the ironing board, as my piano affectionately became known as. I used to have a table on which to have my CDs on sale and chairs, so invariably in the corner of the marquee, so it became a little kind of chill-out zone within the hustle and bustle of the show and of life. And I found that many people with real issues were being drawn to the music, and it gave them an opportunity to reflect and to be ministered to through the music. I mentioned John Daniels just now. John was well known within the Christian music industry, although he was unknown to me. He'd written a number of worship songs and was a regular performer at Spring Harvest. And at the time we met, John was living in Farmington, and he invited me to his home. I can remember the first time he played his music. I'd just been completely blown away. Just amazing. He offered to put some orchestrations to my piano compositions. We kind of started as a bit of fun, really. But it seemed to work so well, we decided to release an album, Wings of an Eagle. So that was our very first album together. John moved back to Texas the following year. His wife is Texan. But we were able to continue to work electronically, and we recorded and released 8 albums together over the years. And what a joy, an enormous joy and privilege it has been working with him. Outside of our recording, as you know, I've given concerts in churches all over, given a couple of school assemblies. They were challenging, and played at the day centre at the Rowan's Hospice on 3 occasions. I performed 3 years running at the Christian Resources Exhibition. And for 9 years, toured giving recitals, lunchtime recitals in cathedrals. Wonderful times. What a privilege to play underneath the octagon tower in the cathedral, for example. And on some beautiful pianos too. I love playing to people wherever in the round, if possible. I've never enjoyed being up on a stage. I like to be at grassroots, something like being at grassroots amongst the people. That's very important to me. But the music on our recordings, which seems to have the capacity to go very deep, has been very comfort and strength to people, especially at times of great need, and it's a great privilege to know. I've never preached through my music. I've never invited people to come and meet Jesus. Rather, I've always felt that God has wanted to use me and the music in a more subtle way. And for me, one of the joys has been the playing of secular songs alongside and interspersed with hymns and worship songs to attract people. And I'll never forget a lady at one show. She was so excited to have stumbled across me. I was playing the worship song, Father, We Love You. She wasn't a Christian, but she liked listening to Good Morning Sunday. And when Alec Jones presented the programme, we had quite a bit of that on Good Morning Sunday. And this lady had heard this song once, and they it had enormous meaning for her, and she remembered it, and she recognised that I was playing it. And it was just so amazing that she was able to not only to sit and listen and to see me playing it live, but to be able to actually buy a CD with it on. Amazing. So there's been an enormous sense of giving, not only a little bit of giving of myself, but also of God, and a real sense of offering to God. My involvement with my home church, St. Peter's, has been largely at arm's length, in that I've never felt called to serve on any of the committees or anything like that. I'm always very happy to help out. I've also run the prayer line for the last 25 years. It's a confidential prayer chain, similar to the one that Shoreline runs, where a team of 9 might have 8 ladies. I call them my gals. And of course, I've given numerous concerts to every of these guys accompanying me, which has been such a joy. I've been a part of the chaplaincy team at QA Hospital for 10 years, just as one of the volunteer assistants. And that's been very much a calling of me. Before COVID came along, I used to look forward so much to my Wednesday afternoons there, ward visiting. And again, I see my one as not one of preaching, but of listening. What an enormous privilege it is to be a small part of the lives of ordinary people, what might be an incredibly difficult time. It may be a short stay in hospital, it might be a long-term confinement, or it may be that their condition is terminal. Obviously, at chaplaincy, we're able to offer all levels of religious and spiritual support, but we are there for patients of all faiths and none, as well as their relatives and friends and visitors and the staff. I know the chaplaincy team have been very busy with staff over the last 18 months. Staff with real issues. And some of the most memorable visits have been with patients who have no faith. I remember one gentleman, Andrew, was there. I went into his room, he was in a single room there. And the first thing he said to me was, well, you and I have fundamentally nothing in common. And you know, from that stemmed the most amazing relationship. Once the boundaries were set, he knew that I wasn't there to try and convert him. He knew I wasn't there as a threat. I had the most wonderful, he was in hospital for a long time before dying. It was about 12 weeks, as I remember, and it was just such a joy to visit Andrew. And in the main, patients are really grateful to be visited by someone who is not medical, hopefully a friendly face, and who cares. Some have no visitors. I've met patients who have no family, no friends, no neighbours, nobody. And in the majority of cases, it might just be for a chat. But there's an enormous sense of being in the right place at the right time. Very hard to describe. Sadly, as volunteers, we're still not able to get into the hospital, missing it enormously. And a few years ago, our vicar at the time, Susan, put me forward to be licensed to give Holy Communion within the parish and at the hospital. And again, what an enormous privilege it is to be alongside somebody, to be sharing Holy Communion with them in their home, care home, or nursing home, or hospital bed. And just to finish, I suppose if there's one thing that my faith has meant to me, it is that wonderful ability to give everything to God. Give Him decisions, worries, anxieties, concerns, my assets and wealth. I believe everything is owned by Him and is only on loan to me. Our future, and of course other people and situations through prayer and the power of the Holy Spirit. We can ask for wisdom, guidance, direction, strength, sustenance, and of course, peace. And there is for me also a deep feeling of what I call the 3 E's. To be equipped, empowered, and enriched. So equipment, empowerment, and enrichment. And it may sound silly, but there have been occasions when I've been playing the piano, wherever, and it just felt as though my arms have been on strings, something kind of takes over. And I've got lost as well. I can remember getting lost and thinking, no idea what I'm playing this. But somehow, everything is fine, everything What an amazing feeling this is, and what a privilege. I've used that word quite a lot, like privilege, but actually I really do mean what a privilege it is to be in this position. I know I've let God down very badly in many cases, and I think it's a common misconception that Christians are goody-goodies, and that life is easy, or far from it. I struggle with it a lot, and it's not been an easy ride. And some of you know I went through a very bad patch some 11 years ago. And there was a time when I distanced myself from God because I felt so wretched. But He's never let me down, and I cherish that promise never to leave me. And I thought it would be lovely to finish with the words of Patrick Regan that really struck me. It was part of Wednesday's break for the Bible, and it was the 18th of August, and you, Julie, were reading from his book, Balancing Forwards. It was from Romans chapter 3, verses 21 to 24. And it was these words that really struck me. We do not need to live perfect lives. Rather, bringing who we are honestly before God. What an absolute privilege to know we have God's totally undeserved grace. Thank you.